what are the programs in line on your platform that can solve our unemployment problem here in our country? And another is the wages and salaries, and of course, we have the OFW. What are
Okay.
your programs, sir?
The three programs, unfortunately, have sometimes conflicting, dimensionary dynamics, let's put it that way. Because wages and salaries, naturally, sometimes is a leverage on the opposite end of job creation and capital investments. We know that. First, what does a government do to solve unemployment? There's only one thing that it must and can do. Make your country a desirable place for capital investments, both domestic and foreign. How? Through the public sector. The president is not an entrepreneur. The president is not a business executive. The president is an executive of the public sector, which are the departments and the supervisor of the local government, supervisor, not controller. And thirdly, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces and the head of the police, basically. So that gives you three things immediately, that the president can do. Number one is to guarantee peace and order as commander-in-chief and head of the police. Without peace and order, and I don't mean peace only, order, meaning to say orderly regulations, reasonable regulations, and compliance on a sustainable basis. Sustainable, meaning to say, panmatagalan of some form of conduct, some norm of conduct. You can't have compliance now and non-compliance tomorrow, ningas kuganoe. And the most effective way of guarding against that is a reasonable regulation. Let's say taxes. We always hear about tax evasion, smuggling, which is true, and we have to go down hard on that. But we should also balance that with more reasonable tax regimes. Can anybody here, perhaps without initial training or exposure to income taxation in the College of Business Administration, fill out the tax return? It's one of the most difficult things to do, actually. Secondly, our tax regimes are one of the highest in Southeast Asia. Although we need the revenue, admittedly, and I'm not advocating for tax relief at this point. But what I'm advocating for is a long-term study on lowering the tax burdens on people. It cannot be had overnight. Nobody can promise you a reduction in the VAT or will take away VAT. I think the contrary is true in any progressive country because the costs of collecting income, estate, business, and specific taxes are much, much more than collecting consumption taxes such as VAT. Now, I talked about peace and order, right? The distinction between physical peace and order. Number two, being the supervisor of local governments. You must exert your actual supervisory authority over local governments for two things. They become capacitated to give basic services to their people which national government should not subsidize, so national government can concentrate on national infrastructure and national policy. And number two, to have sustainable and reasonable regulations, real property tax regimes, efficient participation in tax collection in order to make them, in themselves, within the country, competitive business destinations. Number three, in a supervisor, the head of all government agencies, there must be a clear long-term economic and infrastructure roadmap. Number two, you must allow the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas sufficient independence and authority to steward monetary policy, ensure price stability, and the safety of our credit institutions in this country. Number three, You must balance the conflicts between different policy initiatives. For example, the need to expand sustainably our tourist destinations. It's a conflict between construction and environmental protection. The conflict between revenue, which will mean earnings for people, and destruction of the environment, such as the question of sustainable large-scale mining. It's another example of conflicts. Fifth, you have to have the ability to promote your country. Because at the end of the day, you have to market your country as a safe investment destination, both domestically and abroad, so that the objective is capital investments, both domestic and foreign, which result